Welcome everyone to Every Woman Empowered's Chit Chat. I am your founder, Shawna J. Serniak of the Every Woman Empowered, and today I have my co-hosts,
Jani Galarneau, international artist and resident artist of Every Woman Empowered.
And Nelia Genoud, certified laughter yoga instructor, founder of Let's Laugh Yay, and happiness ambassador for Every Woman Empowered.
And today our special guest is Tantoo Cardinal, an award-winning actress of Métis First Nations descent who can be seen on the ABC television network series Stumptown. Her 50-year career spans more than 120 film, TV, and theater roles. Tantoo is one of the most recognized Indigenous actors of her generation. You have seen her on Legends of the Fall, Oscar-winning Dances with Wolves, Wind River, Sea, Westworld, Longmire, Godless, Hamlet, King Lear, and the Rez Sisters, just to name a few. Please help me welcome Tantoo Cardinal.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you. And Stumptown is on CTV.
Oh, NCTV now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was all last year.
Well, you know what? I have to be honest with you. I don't have cable, so I didn't know it was on CTV. But I'm definitely going to check it out. I've seen it on the video on the internet, so I have been watching on there. So Tantoo, I gotta say thank you for being on the show. As you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. As an Indigenous woman growing up, watching you do the variety of roles that you have has made such an impact on me and has made a difference for myself and for a lot of young Indigenous women and men that were looking for, you know, that role model, and you were totally that role model for me, because we didn't have many Indigenous people as role models that were out there, especially in the acting field. And I just want to thank you so much for all that you've done and for being a part of this show today.
Thank you. Thank you for being there.
Thanks.
So we're going to start off our questions right away here for you, Tantoo. So you have had a very distinguished career, which we just finished talking about. What was the role that had the most impact on you personally?
You know, I tend to say that they all do, because each one of them, if Shawna was talking about, there were not many of us that were on screen. So each one had a reason. Each one had some image, something that was part of our change. And, you know, different people appreciated different projects for their own reasons. So, I mean, I think Loyalties was one of the big ones because it dealt with molestation. It dealt with an issue, sexual abuse, that hadn't really been being dealt with yet at that time. So Loyalties was one of those little warrior movies that came along and brought the issue forward. So people then started to deal with it. In Lac La Biche, where the movie was made, they started doing circles at the community college. Wow. Because it was rampant. I mean, I remember that from when I was a kid. And that's a part of our lovely residential school history and the impacts of all that. So Loyalties, I think, is one of the movies that right up there because of its effectiveness and its timeliness.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. I went open mouth and excited because you said Lac La Biche, and that was the town that I grew up near. And yeah, that's so exciting that you were able to have that impact on that neighborhood there. So yeah, you have lived through so much, and I can just only imagine the stories that you have from when you were first starting out in the industry and the racism that you must have faced in auditions and on set. What kind of kept you going through all those times?
Well, you know, the racism and sexism, those things, they all have their little moments. And I think a part of the racism is in the stories themselves. I mean, there are stories that that we've been a part of for a long time, but not through our eyes, not through our history, and the stories were not our stories. We were a participant in someone else's stories. So that was frustrating. And that can be associated with racism or colonialism or, you know, any number one of those oppressive thought patterns and beliefs. So there's that. There's, you know, our place in the story initially. I can remember, here's just one example. Like there was a movie that I was going to do, of course, a small part in. This is quite a few years ago. And I showed up. I was supposed to go show up for wardrobe. And so I walked in where wardrobe was, and they said, you have to go down there. So, okay, so I went down there, and it was extras, the extras tent. And so I thought, okay, so I was directed to the wrong place. So I went back over to where actors were being wardrobed, and I had to convince this woman that I was an actual actor in the movie and that I was in the right place for wardrobe. And you know, and that's a case of she should have been aware,
Yes.
but she was not. And the assumption was made.
Right.
So, you know, there's just little things like that. And there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But that's a fact of life. So, and this was before social media. This was not, it was not available to me to get any backup for any of these issues, because very often I was the only female that was in the actors' cycles, and the non-native, not Indigenous actors really didn't have any compassion for that. And also there's this thing where actors don't, you know, they'd rather not make waves. And so it wasn't their issue, so I couldn't really get any support for any of this kind of stuff. And that's all changing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yes.
changing.
Thanks to the
In a
Me
big
Too.
So that now, I mean, we have crew.
Right.
That there's a lot of brown people on crew. And very often the stories will be, you know, now we have our own filmmakers, our own storytellers. So now the stories are our stories.
Mm-hmm. What advice or suggestions can you give to women walking that path of empowerment and self-development?
I'm sorry?
Oh, what advice or suggestions can you give to women walking the path of empowerment?
Walking the path of empowerment. Is that what I've been doing?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
It is know who you are, stand by your convictions, listen to your intuitive. If you're, you know, I chose this path because of what I saw of how our people were being treated, and I wasn't going to go to university or colleges or anything like that. I didn't trust. And so I think all along the way, I was listening to my intuition. I was listening to the voice in my head that told me that we each have a gift. And so I started the process of finding out, okay, if everyone has a gift, what is mine? And I just started volunteering here and there and everywhere, or taking short-term contracts and finding the things I should never ever do, and finding the things that I was able to respond to. Because a lot of what I was hearing was, you have no sense of responsibility. And, you know, to break it down, ability to respond is responsibility. And so if I couldn't respond to it, then what was that? Was that it, or was that me? And so those things had to be jived. And I have a great belief in stories. That's what kept me together. When I was a kid, I was just so fascinated when the elders would come. Well, the elders' mom's friends would come over, and to hear those stories and to just feel the texture of that life, that day, that event that they were talking about. And I think a really important element is, I was raised by my grandmother, and her English wasn't all that good. So I grew up with the language Cree was around. Dene was around as well, but not in our community. Our community was mostly Cree speaking or Métis speaking. And then in the language it's like a sensory experience. So when they were telling the stories, it was like you're absolutely there. And also, I was still, the life that they were talking about still existed when I was a child in Anzac. The Mackenzies across the tracks, well, we were on the other side of the tracks. They were on the side of town. And you know, I know what it is to ride in a wagon with horses pulling it, and to camp out and go berry picking with a group of people, to hop in a boat and go across the lake. Those kinds of things, that way of life, I've tasted and experienced.
Do you think that's what's kept you grounded?
Yes. I think what's kept me grounded is a love of my people. That's what got me into doing this in the first place, is a great sense of injustice and a furious rage about the way that we're treated and the way that we're perceived, the lies, the misrepresentation, all of that kind of stuff. To this day, I have very little patience with manipulations. That's why I have such a hard time with this country and what's going on in that Oval Office right now. It's just so much of what our history has always been, and that's how the land got stolen, by people that act like that, and the devious lengths that they'll go to get what they want.
Yes, true.
At anyone's expense.
Right. The rich get richer and everybody else stays the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or gets worse.
Yeah.
I mean, we were in fine shape. And by the time we got done, everybody was locked in a small space and eating horrible, rotten food, and the things that women had to do to get it, and on and on. I mean, the history that we have, the fact that we are still in existence, is an incredible testament to our power, our strength, our roots, and the legitimacy of who we are, who our ancestors are, and what they did, what they left us, was enough for us to survive thus far.
Wow. So you talked about stories. What do you think is the most important Indigenous story that needs to be on film right now at this moment?
Well, oh, there's so many, but I'm embarking on a documentary that I hope will hit some of those. We have to tell our stories, and we have to retell the stories that others have been telling from outside of who we are. We have to get to the truth, and I think that anybody who feels a story to great lengths, there's a story that vibrates inside of you, then that's the story that you should be telling. And there's a lot of stories that are vibrating inside of me, and I'm busy. I have opportunity to be able to breathe into stories right now. Stumptown is going into a second season. Yes. I'm going to be going to Alberta in a couple weeks to work on writing my one-woman show. And I'll be creating an experience space, I'll call it, for young people to be able to tell their stories. And I think that's crucially important, because I can still feel the sensation of being absolutely blocked, like I couldn't speak, because there is absolutely no interest in who we are or what our stories were. And if I found a great gem of truth that had been dug out, I had a strong sensation of what I was doing is I was digging through the rubble of the chaos and destruction that was left by colonialism and genocide and all of this stuff. When I was starting to create my characters, I was just digging through, trying to find some truth to enliven my characters and enlighten the moment that my characters were involved in. And you have to be very careful how you presented that, because for one thing, this is not what our story is about. This is a story, for example, the first feature that I was ever in, and I remember hearing, this is a white woman's story. This is not your story.
Yeah.
So, and that was important as well, because it really forced me inward. I had no place to go to. So it created a silence, but it also, I was not going to be downed. So I guess you could say that I became connected with my ancestors, because they also were silenced, and they also had to be denied. They were denied truth, and they lived through so much hardship and devastation, and yet they persisted with such beauty and generosity and love, all those things, after all they've been through. It was absolutely inspiring. So when I run into those things, I would be in solidarity with our ancestors, and I would be in solidarity with other people in our community that I knew were going through those very same things. And all I've been doing all this time is just really trying to offer what I can.
Right.
And which may be very limited. Somebody was saying, well, I decided I wasn't going to be an actor because it diminishes you. You don't have much to offer. Well, yeah, that's true. But somebody has to be an actor for your wonderful pieces.
Right, and you have contributed a lot to your work, and you've chosen some incredible pieces of work that is telling the stories and portraying the stories, and to me, you're doing your part. Definitely, you're making a difference. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies, I know we have a few more questions. Do we want to go to the fun questions, or do we want to, get right down to asking some make this all light and fluffy and see what kind of comments come out of Tantoo?
Sure. Tantoo, what was the last thing that really made you laugh?
I don't know. I don't make notes of these things necessarily. Yeah, no. I don't know.
Nothing to laugh about. Nothing's made you too. Well, okay. Well, there we go. So there you go, Nelia. You got your answer.
Well, I
don't know. You know what? There's something when somebody says, "No, this is really funny." I was kind of already. I lost the taste. I don't know. I think that spontaneity is the absolute best.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the best laugh.
It is. It
always is the best laugh.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a silly question. If you were an ice cream flavor, what flavor would you be and why?
I would be Rocky Road. Because, now listen to the title, it's a rocky road. Being an Indigenous woman is a rocky road.
It is.
There's nothing paved and easy there.
No.
See how I am? See? What's the fun in that, right?
Well, see, when Jani asked me that question, I said I was a rocky road too, except I added that there was that little sprinkle of nuts on top because I'm a little cuckoo. So.
Well, you know what? You have to be.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite lyrics is I've always been crazy, but it's kept me from going insane.
Good lyric.
And she can sing. Woo! Okay, well, you got your series coming up, and you're going into your second season for Stumptown. I gotta ask, has COVID been affecting you with the series? Has it affected a little bit of the filming that's going on, that sort of thing?
Well, we were one of the productions that actually finished our season, and we finished our wrap party the next day. And then the next day is when isolation was called.
Wow.
We were lucky. And
Yes.
so our production has had the opportunity to kind of sneak up on it, set it up, how we're going to be shooting this year. We don't have all the details, but one thing I like about it's cut down on the number of hours that will be actually out there working. I heard some idea that we would be doing more exteriors, with smaller crews, and we'll be doing readings of the scripts before we go into shooting. So that really helps you because you hear everybody's voices, you hear what the story is in each episode before you go in, whereas before last year, you can read the whole script, but you don't hear what the other actors are doing with it.
Right.
And so, that's going to help a lot to have that preparation done. And then I guess I'll be learning some new techniques on how to work. Apparently we're not using green screen. Some shows will be using green screen. And I think that it's going to really depend on the show itself.
Right.
What methods that they're going to be using.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, if
Sounds
Michael
exciting.
ever needs an older woman of interest to be, his woman on the show, I'm more than welcome to step in and help out in any way I can for your production, because that's just, I'm a giving person. That's kind of how I work.
Well, thank you very much. Another thing that's new this year, and I don't know how much COVID had to do with that. COVID is pretty sneaky, hitting all corners, but we have a showrunner that's a woman of color.
Oh,
And we had a great meeting yesterday, and she knows what we're talking about.
wow.
And she is she's kind of top dog on the stories and the flows and the arcs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really feeling positive.
That's awesome.
That we may be able to kick out some old, hard to extricate images and attitudes, that an older woman has to be stuffy and wise and all that kind of stuff all the time.
Right.
I mean, there's a place for every kind of character, but I think that it does us well to have a broad smorgasbord of, because each of us is an individual. We're all different.
Yes.
So if, and here's Stumptown trying to tell some of our own stories. So let's see.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, they're good people.
Unfortunately, we're already out of time, and I know we'd love to go on and ask you some more questions. I'm really excited to hear about this one-woman show, and we'd love to have you come back and share with us about that once it's all said and done. We'd love to have you come back on to Chit Chat. You've been such a wonderful guest and so accommodating to us. I just wish you all the best during this time, and thank you so much, Tantoo.
Thank you very much, and you too. All the best. Stay safe.
Yes.
Take
care.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You know what? You'll be prettier longer if you wear masks.
Good to know.
Okay. Okay. Have a nice day.